Welcome to DLSN, a podcast brought to you by McGuireWoods. DLSN promotes the advancement of women in private equity and finance through conversations with women in the private equity and finance space. These conversations provide both insights and practical takeaways to inform your deal work and enhance the culture of your organization. If you're ready to drive the industry toward a more inclusive and diverse environment, then it's time to come to the table.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to DLSN. My name is Phyllis Young. I am a debt finance partner at McGuireWoods in the Dallas and Houston offices. Today, our guest is Kenna Craver, who is the founder and managing partner of Kamel Capital. Hello, Kenna. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Phyllis. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for being our guest today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you are doing at Kamel Capital?
Absolutely. So I am the founder and managing partner of Kamel Capital, which is a private investment firm where I partner with other investors as an independent sponsor and clients to acquire businesses. Just a really quick background about how I got here. I began my career in the tech industry, and I spent a little bit over a decade there just working with startups and established companies to build out their B2B and B2C software applications. And that was really fun. I got to learn a lot and work with a lot of cross-functional teams and clients. And that experience just led me to eventually want to have more autonomy over business decisions. And that is what led me to entrepreneurship and how I moved into finance.
A lot of people that are entrepreneurs have certain character traits in common. What do you think some of those character traits are that you have that you feel have benefited you and part of your success and being able to branch out and doing independent sponsor work?
I think my authenticity, for sure, just being genuine and true to myself has allowed me to build strong relationships, both personally and professionally. People appreciate honesty and transparency, and it fosters trust, which I think is the foundation of any successful endeavor. I would also say my resilience. Being resilient gives me the ability to bounce back from setbacks and learn from failures and just keep moving forward. It's important to be clear that it doesn't mean that I'm unaffected by challenges. I definitely get discouraged sometimes, but it's about just having the strength and determination to overcome them. And finally, I would say just being adaptable. I always say, I can adapt to anywhere my 2 feet are. So being adaptable and just having the ability to adjust to new situations has definitely been instrumental in my career, especially in M&A, where remaining flexible is crucial.
On those times when you are feeling maybe beat down, the industry can sometimes beat you down, or what are some things that you do to bounce back with your resiliency?
I would say definitely check in with my network and just talk to people that have proven to be good sounding boards for me, because sometimes you have to get out of your own head. And a lot of times you can overthink things and make things bigger than what they actually are. So I like to just talk to others who have either been through whatever it is that I'm going through or can just offer an objective opinion. And usually that helps me a lot.
One thing that I hear a lot from especially women independent sponsors is that there are not a lot of other women independent sponsors out there. And so it's hard to find a peer group that you can network with or bounce things off of that are, in the same type of situation that you are in. Do you have other women independent sponsors that you network with, or do you just have your sort of general network that you've built over time that you bounce ideas off of? How does that work from your standpoint?
Well, unfortunately, I haven't encountered very many women in this industry, and that's something that I am hoping will change over time. I do have a few contacts, and they are all in different parts of the industry. So some are more doing client work, advisory work, and then others who are actually doing deals. So I definitely keep in contact with them. That helps me to just keep a pulse on what's going on. But also, of course, I rely on just my general network that I've built throughout my career.
Speaking of not having a lot of women, why do you actively support diversity in the workplace and in the executive ranks?
Well, I definitely think that diversity brings fresh perspectives and just overall leads to better decision making. And it really just reflects the broader world that we operate in and makes businesses more adaptable and resilient, which gives them a competitive advantage. So I think when teams bring varied perspectives, whether it's cultural or gender based, it just creates a richer, more competitive organization, and you can attract top talent and connect better with diverse customers. There's just so many benefits to support diversity in the workplace.
As you've been in the industry now for a while, and I'm sure you've probably seen some changes in the industry compared to when you first started out, especially if you were in the tech industry. What in your experience helped you feel valued, included in the industry, sort of early on or even now? And knowing what you know now, what are some of the hallmarks of an inclusive workplace?
I would say being invited to top level strategy meetings or pitches early in my career definitely made me feel like I was contributing to the bigger picture. And it just gave me a broader perspective on what was going on in the company overall and not just in my little silo. So definitely being invited to those types of meetings helped me. And I also had leaders who took the time to share insights with me early on. And that helped me with, again, just providing that objective point of view and showing me where I had gaps in my learning. So I would say clear mentorship opportunities can help you feel more valued and included. And of course, representation at leadership levels. You can't be what you can't see. So definitely being able to see women at those leadership levels and just being included in key conversations makes a difference. And as far as the hallmarks of an inclusive workplace, I would say it feels like collaboration in action. I remember working on teams where every voice at the table, regardless of rank, was given space to share insights. And it just really made everyone feel included and valued and just offered those different perspectives that I talked about earlier. Additionally, I think leadership should seek out to diversify recruitment pipelines and just ensure that that inclusivity is baked into every stage of the business.
Kind of when you started out sort of early on, do you feel like your voice was being heard when you were participating in those types of groups, or did you have to work to or change maybe how you were interacting or your approach in order to make sure that your voice was not only being heard, but people were acting on the things that you were saying?
I was actually really lucky in that I always had people or leaders, I should say, who actually took the time to listen to what I had to say. Now, of course, early in my career, no one's trying to listen to the person who just graduated from college, right?
Right.
But,
Yeah.
you know, but over time, sitting and observing, I also had to build the confidence to speak up, right? So just sitting and observing and watching the dynamics at play helped me to feel more confident in speaking up. And then I also, like I said, I got very lucky with having leaders who would actually listen to me and consider my viewpoint. And I think that definitely helped me become more confident and also helped me to do the work to make sure that I was contributing value to the conversation. And just having those leaders actually listen to me made me feel that that work was worth it.
That's great, especially if you were able to have senior people that you were working with early on who valued you and made you feel valued. That's a great experience to have when you're starting out your career.
Definitely.
I want to switch what we're talking about a little bit and delve into your thoughts on the role of women in deal sourcing, negotiation, and execution. And so, my first question really is around deal sourcing. As you know, deal sourcing can often hinge on networks and relationships. How do you approach building and maintaining the relationships that you are using for your deal sourcing?
So I try to focus on providing value first, whether that's just sharing insights or making introductions or just supporting others' goals. I really try to be intentional about showing up for the people in my life, professionally and personally. So supporting their endeavors, offering words of encouragement, just being a sounding board for them. So definitely that's one way that I approach it. And also consistent follow up and just being genuinely interested. I really do care about the people in my life and want to know what they have going on. What are they working on? What are they inspired by? What's exciting to them right now? And just staying visible also in professional circles helps to maintain and grow those connections.
For someone who is listening, who's considering going into the independent sponsor world, for some people, I think it can be sort of intimidating to be out there on your own, away from your probably a lot of people are with an organization, but they're kind of thinking about it delving out into the independent sponsor world. What tips, I guess, would you say, would you have for those people who are thinking about independent sponsor, but still maybe are a little hesitant because they are concerned about things like how would they would approach deal sourcing?
I would say don't wait for permission to take your seat at the table. Build your skills and network strategically and just be relentless in pursuing your goals. When I started, I often doubted my ability to contribute. And so my advice would be to just trust your preparation and take risks. I remember one of my first networking events felt really intimidating, and I was new and I didn't know anyone else in the industry. But I just prepared talking points and researched attendees and ended up leaving with some valuable contacts who later we remained friends and continued to build a relationship, and we've sent deals to each other, and it's just been really valuable. So I would say be proactive about building relationships and never shy away from asking questions or pursuing opportunities.
What practically does that look like? So, like on a daily basis when you're working, what strategies are you using that you find the most effective in sourcing deals from a practical standpoint?
I've actually found a lot of value in targeting underrepresented founders. So, for example, minority or woman owned businesses, because they often have untapped potential due to less access to capital. So, I've sourced deals by just building relationships in these communities through industry associations and chambers of commerce, and also just again staying abreast of what's going on within my own network. People often send me an email because they know what I'm looking for and what I'm interested in. So just maintaining relationships and staying visible, staying top of mind. I even keep a spreadsheet and I know exactly when's the last time I spoke with a contact. So I know when it's time to follow up, because those are things that just kind of fall by the wayside when you're so busy in your day to day. You forget to check in on people and see what's going on. So I like to keep a spreadsheet just to keep things organized, and I know exactly who I should reach out to and just see what they have going on. And just by staying visible and staying in touch, people will remember you and they will send deals your way. They know what you're working on. And that has definitely helped me in sourcing deals.
Do you have any practices that you do on like your spreadsheet, for instance? Do you do that sort of on a daily basis, weekly basis? Do you have any sort of practices that you're doing on a sort of routine basis in order to keep up your network and your deal sourcing opportunities?
I do. I try to check that spreadsheet at least weekly, usually at the beginning of the week, because I also like to theme batch my work. So on specific days, I do certain tasks. So I usually save my relationship building tasks and just reaching out and meetings for later in the week. And so early in the week, I'll check to see who haven't I spoken to in a while, who do I need to follow up with, and I'll do that. Another thing is just staying updated on LinkedIn, even if you just take the time to like someone's post or comment on it or share an article that you found interesting, those are things that I do to, again, stay visible and stay connected with others. And those are just a few practical things that I try to do. And it's really easy. It only takes a few minutes a week.
Right. Yeah, that's really helpful because I think a lot of times people, kind of conceptually know that they should be doing some things. So it's good to hear some concrete, like our actual practices in action to help people.
Yes, definitely. That's helped me a lot.
Turning to a different aspect of the role of women in deal sourcing, negotiations. So when you actually are negotiating with people on deals, is often seen as a high stakes skill. What do you consider to be the most critical elements of a successful negotiation?
I would say preparation for sure, because negotiation can seem really intimidating, and preparation is my foundation. So before I have any meeting with a client or a seller, I map out the other party's priorities and their potential objections and their non negotiables. So just active listening and understanding the other party's motivations are equally important. So I always try to aim for outcomes where both sides feel like they've gained something meaningful. And I like to let people talk. I just listen because a lot of times they will tell you exactly what it is that they want and what their goals are. And I take notes of that and keep it in my back pocket. And so I always use those whenever I just want to make sure that both sides are being heard and we're both walking away with something meaningful. So I think just balancing that data with emotional intelligence is key to finding win-win outcomes. So I think preparation is the most critical element of a successful negotiation.
I agree with that. I think whenever I've gone into negotiations, like you can be nervous even, but if you're prepared, that takes away the sense of even being nervous about something or being concerned about what the outcome could be. I know from my own practice, whenever I can back up something from a legal perspective by, well, it says this in the statute, or, here's it's what it says in this precedent document or something like that. When you really take the time ahead of time and someone pushes back on you and you can immediately come back with something concrete, it usually takes the wind out of their sails on that argument. And so preparation, I agree, is also really extremely critical to successful negotiations. You mentioned emotional intelligence, which I think as a skill, women in particular, is something that a value add that we have in negotiations. Would you agree that incorporating empathy or emotional intelligence also impacts negotiations in a positive manner?
I would 100% agree with that, because I think empathy builds trust and just opens pathways for collaboration. So, by taking the time to understand the other party's needs and concerns, you can craft solutions that feel fair, which often leads to quicker agreements and longer term partnerships. People just want to know that they've been heard. They want to have a voice, they want to feel heard, they want to feel seen. And so by giving them that, by remembering that and being intentional about it, you can actually, I think, lead to a quicker agreement and maybe even a future partnership. So I definitely think that incorporating empathy and emotional intelligence into M&A and negotiations has a positive impact for sure.
And you mentioned earlier about your character traits, authenticity. Do you think your authenticity adds to your skill set when you're negotiating?
I do, because people often, it's funny whenever I'm having a conversation with a seller or a client, I tell them from the beginning, listen, I want this to be a win-win. I want us to both walk away feeling good about this. And if we can't get there, then I have no problem just walking away and wishing you well and hoping that you do get what you want. And if I can help you, moving forward, I'd be happy to make an introduction or anything. And by just being authentic and genuine about that, it gets people to kind of drop their guard a little bit with me, because I genuinely mean that. And so that has definitely helped me for sure.
Yeah, I could see where that would be. 'Cause sometimes if you're negotiating with people, there's times when it sort of seems like they're hiding something or you're not so sure, and it kind of comes off in a certain way. So when you're negotiating with that person, you're just kind of not clear if they're hearing you or they've got something else in mind. And so the authenticity and just being upfront about things, I think, really can make it easier to negotiate and really get down to this is the business, this is what we care about, this is what we don't care about, and just kind of getting to a resolution.
Definitely. We want to get to the end. Like, we don't want to just have a lot of back and forth. So just having an understanding and knowing that we're on the same team here. We're just trying to achieve the same goal. So let's just get there and be honest about that. And I think everything is just going to work out fine, whether this deal works out or not.
Have you ever had a deal you were working on that just was bad from the start, or kind of at some point things just went south and everybody just kind of got out of there? Have you had to deal with this type of situation where things have just turned into a really bad type of situation or bad negotiations or difficult?
Fortunately, I have not. Of course, I've heard some horror stories, but I have not had a deal yet where everything just hit the fan. So, of course, there's been tense moments throughout the process where through some negotiation, maybe someone wants to change terms at the last minute or things like that. But then I go back to, again, having that emotional intelligence and even just saying to someone, hey, I think this is something that we both want. And I think as long as we continue to collaborate and communicate with each other, maybe we can get there. But I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. Are you open to continuing? And then allowing that person to, it kind of gives them an out if they've decided that they no longer want to move forward. It kind of gives them a way to do so. But if they are still on the same page and want to move forward, that gives them a chance to say, you know what, yes, I do want to continue. And so let's keep talking. So I haven't had any horror stories, but like I said, I have had some experience with just some uncomfortable situations for
Right,
sure.
yeah, understood. When you are negotiating, there's a lot of moving pieces that are going on. You're also trying to execute on the deals and agree to the terms of the agreement, and you're talking to people and probably getting hundreds of emails and things like that, even on deals that you're not working on. So there's always a lot of moving pieces. What are some skills that you think are essential for overseeing a successful transaction from start to finish?
So I would say communication is critical. During a recent transaction, just having clear weekly updates just ensure that all the stakeholders, so the lawyers, the accountants, operations teams, everyone were aligned. Time management and just prioritization also played a role, especially when addressing unexpected delays. So I think just staying in communication, having clear updates, time management, and just being proactive in solving issues rather than reactive keeps the process on track, I think.
When you are dealing with the different types of lawyers think a certain way, the ops people think about things in a certain way, are you sort of changing your communication styles when you are communicating with the different constituencies?
I think I'm pretty consistent with each of them because I found that even with the different stakeholders, so lawyers, accountants, ops teams, you're still dealing with people and they have their own unique ways of communicating. So I just try to be clear and transparent about anything, like any issues or any updates that I need to make, and just try to remain proactive because one deal you might be dealing with one accountant and that, just likes things quick and direct. And then you might have another deal where an accountant they want to have weekly meetings, they want to have maybe even daily updates. Like they just communicate differently across different deals. So I try to just learn their communication style early on and just tailor my communications to that person within each deal.
Do you have any other processes or best practices that you use to ensure a deal's success?
One best practice that I rely on is just creating a comprehensive deal checklist that covers due diligence, contract negotiations, integration plans, and all of that. That just helps me stay on track because, as you mentioned, there's just a lot of moving parts. So, for example, in one transaction, this checklist that I have just helped identify a compliance issue early, and that just saves time and prevents costly surprises. So I really rely heavily on having a deal checklist. And of course it depending on the deal, it varies, but that's something that helps. And then also I always have a post close. I recommend a 90-day review just to align teams and just ensure that the deal's value is realized. Because as you're going through the process of getting the deal done, it really takes you have to kind of switch your mindset once the deal closes and now you're into operating. So having just a 90-day review to see where we are and align teams, it makes sure that the deal's value is actually realized. So those are a few best practices that I found to be helpful.
Tell me a little bit more about that 90-day review because I think that's interesting to think about, especially as an attorney who's working on the documents. A lot of times for us as a deal lawyer, it sort of ends once we close. I mean, there's post-closing things that need to get done sometimes, like deliverables or sort of unfinished business. But from an attorney standpoint, we usually will move to the next deal. And so I'm really curious to hear more about that 90-day process because, maybe that could even help inform other legal professionals, for instance, on earlier on in the stage or in the deal stage, even with negotiations and putting things into documents, maybe some things that we should be thinking about.
Yes, definitely. I found it to be very helpful. So with the 90 days, I think just industry wide, I think the common goal is don't touch anything for 90 days. Like don't make any major changes, like just keep everything the same for 90 days, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
usually I think just that first 30 days, the goal is just transition, right? We're just trying to make sure we have everything that we need. And I really use this mostly with clients. So are we trained on all the operations processes or do the operations teams understand what they are responsible for over these next few weeks? So we're looking at just software tools, team management, supplier management. Of course, it varies depending on what type of business we're talking about, but we're just trying to finalize this transition. And then the second month, so the next 30 days, would just be about streamlining those operations and starting to develop a growth strategy. So you're not necessarily making any changes, but you're thinking about, okay, how do we actually grow this thing that we just bought? So how are we going to get the customers to come back? How are we going to acquire new customers? Are we going to expand markets and things like that? You're just starting to have those conversations and just streamline those operations. And then this is also when you're looking at your team and getting a better understanding of everyone's roles and making sure that we have everyone we need. Do we need to hire anyone else and things like that? And then the final 30 days, so that would be about implementing that growth strategy that we discussed previously and just starting to think about scale. So implementing that growth strategy, making sure we have our team in place now so we're ready to put the pedal to the metal, right? So those first 90 days, I just try to frame all of our conversations around those common goals.
Ken, in what ways do you think women bring unique strengths to the deal process in private equity?
I love this question because I think women excel in just fostering collaboration and trust. So, for example, in one deal, I managed a conflict between two parties with different priorities just by focusing on common goals. And so, my ability to listen and to understand their needs led to a creative solution that satisfied both sides. So, I think women excel in fostering that trust by really just listening and understanding others' needs. I would also add that, of course, emotional intelligence, we've talked about that a little bit here, and multitasking. Women, we are the queens of multitasking. So I think that really helps us in the deal process in private equity. And long-term relationship building, those are just a few strengths that I think women bring to every single stage of the process.
Absolutely. Any other final thoughts on the role of women in private equity and our impact?
I would say to be bold and authentic. I talk to women who are interested in private equity or M&A, and a lot of times they feel a little nervous about it. And I always just try to encourage them and let them know, just be yourself and just be bold, because you can do this. Own your story and use it as an advantage. I remember when I first started, being a woman and being a minority felt like challenges, but I just reframe them as differentiators, because I know that the industry, it needs unique perspectives and different leadership styles. So that, and invest in continuous learning. I'm always trying to learn more and seek out mentorship, seek out others that are further along than you. And don't be afraid to disrupt traditional norms to create a lasting and positive impact.
I think that's all really great advice and very motivational. On Deal Us In, we usually end all of our podcasts with our signature question, which is, what advice would you give your younger 22-year-old self?
I would say, don't wait for permission. Don't wait for permission to take your seat at the table. So build out your skills, network strategically, and just be relentless in pursuing your goals. So I would also add to invest in relationships. That's something that it took me a while to learn. As an introvert, I like to just do my work and sit in the back. So learning to invest in relationships has helped me tremendously, because mentors and sponsors can open doors that you didn't know existed. I've had so many opportunities just land into my lap just because I started to invest in relationships and make sure I keep in contact with others and support them in their endeavors as well. So I would say definitely just invest in relationships, build your skills, and be relentless in pursuing your goals.
That is great. And that's a great way to end our podcast today. Kenna, thanks so much for being our guest. Really appreciate you joining us today and hearing about you and what you're doing at Kamel Capital. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Phyllis. I really appreciate it. This was fun.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Thank you for joining us at the table for this episode of Deal Us In. If you have a recommendation for an inspiring interviewee, a question you'd like us to ask, or topic you would like to hear covered, or if you'd like to tell us about women-focused initiatives in the field, please email us at wpef@McGuireWoods.com. We look forward to hearing from you. This podcast was recorded and is being made available by McGuireWoods for informational purposes only. By accessing this podcast, you acknowledge that McGuireWoods makes no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in the podcast. The views, information, or opinions expressed during this podcast series are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily reflect those of McGuireWoods. This podcast should not be used as a substitute for competent legal advice from a licensed professional attorney in your state and should not be construed as an offer to make or consider any investment or course of action.